It was really one of the most complicated hostage rescue missions, I think, ever. There was hostages held in two separate locations, very close to one another. And in order to rescue both of them together, the Israeli forces, had to invade the area in a parallel way, coming together, and knowing that if one of the rescues teams would be compromised or discovered, the other hostages might have been taken away or killed, and that was, I think, the biggest concern. That's why so much of this operation was kept under dark. Only top senior commanders were aware of it. They came in. But according to the reports, they came in on a truck and identified as Gazans that are trying to move into their new flat that they rented in the area. There were both male and female soldiers that came in dressed as Arabs. They got into the area. They had mattresses on the truck. They were meant to disguise the whole thing as best as they can, really to make sure that the locals would not inform Hamas. And they arrived into the location. They saved parallel both the three male hostages that were held in one location and Noa Argamani that was held in a separate location. Now the details are becoming clear that there was a journalist, a Palestinian journalist, that held that held the three male hostages in his home, a very wealthy family. An Al Jazeera journalist held the hostages, and they invaded the area. They took the hostages as fast as they could, and as they were trying to leave the location, Hamas terrorists started launching RPGs from civilian population at the forces. The forces, actually, one of the trucks was hit, so they had to evacuate from this truck and move to another vehicle. All the time there was fire, heavy fire by Hamas. We know that one soldier, Arnon, was killed in this heroic rescue mission, and the forces were able to disengage as quickly as possible. But to think about all of this, all of this operation happening within a civilian population, happening in a densely populated area that people were, broad daylight, people were walking around. The IDF was trying to get the hostages out, and Hamas was continuously firing heavy fire on them, RPGs, firing from guns. It was really a hectic place for the forces. So it's really a miracle that they were able to save the hostages and release them from Hamas captivity. The expectations from Israel is just insane at this point. Of course, Israel is informing the Gazan civilians continuously throughout this war of where the operation is going to happen, and we've seen that Hamas is moving within the civilian population to different locations. That's why the hostages were held not only in the civilian, in an area that has civilians in it, but quite literally within the home of a journalist. So when we're hearing quite often on how the IDF is targeting journalists or targeting civilians, this fact that a journalist is actually a Hamas terrorist that held hostages, innocent hostages, in his home, in his family home, for over 8 months, should be a moment of reckoning for a lot of the voices in the international media that have criticized Israel and took Hamas words for granted. And of course, immediately after it happened, Hamas, in a matter of a few seconds, already counted over 200 casualties. We'll never know if it's true or not. I'm sure there were civilians that were hurt by Hamas fire in the fire exchange. But I mean, the fact that I heard from BBC and other places saying, why did the IDF not inform Hamas and the civilians before they came in to take the hostages? And the answer is that if we did inform them, they would have killed the hostages, as they said over and over again that they would do, and actually have acted on it and killed and executed several of the hostages that they've been holding in captivity. So of course, Israel had to do everything it can to keep this operation as secret as possible. Not even soldiers in Israel that were part of the operation knew exactly the full details, because they wanted to make sure that this operation actually takes place. And in the past there was a hostage rescue that happened overnight. This time it was in daylight to keep this element of surprise. So of course Israel would not go and tell them before coming and rescuing hostages that, by the way, should never have been there to begin with. The first examination, I know they looked very happy to be with their families, but even the medical examination is coming out that they are suffering from ill nutrition. Although they look very happy to be back home, we see that there's a deep psychological effect, which of course there is over them. We all remember the pictures of Noa being kidnapped. From the first details that we're getting from Noa, it seems that she was held in a family home in Gaza. The family has told her that she should be so grateful to them because there are far worse places that she could be held in. She was held in sort of house slave conditions, so she had to clean, probably cook as well for the family. And she said actually that during the operation, when the door was open, that was the sign that the family gave her that she needs to go out and start cleaning the house, to just open the door. So when the soldiers came in and opened the door, she thought that she was supposed to go and clean, and then she saw the soldiers and she was relieved. But that sort of conditions that she was held in, she couldn't see daylight. There was a few times that they let her out, dressed her up as an Arab woman, covered her head, and let her go out, but that was a few times. The male hostages are also saying that they've been moved quite frequently from one place to another. The conditions were not, sometimes they were in family homes, sometimes they were in other places. But the fact that they were held again by a journalist is, I think, very shocking, and it's something that Israelis and the Israeli authorities have been saying for quite a long time. We know that there was a UN staff that kidnapped hostages. We have video footage of that. We have now confirmation that journalists for Al Jazeera is holding hostages. It's when we're speaking about civilians in Gaza, the fact that so many of them are collaborating with Hamas, and the fact that so many of them are related to Hamas doesn't really give you a lot of wiggle room for to separate this population from the terrorists. And I think it's something that we have to ask ourselves: how come not even one Palestinian civilian in Gaza has done anything to help the hostages or to save them, or to release them? Those are innocent hostages. We have a 1-year-old baby held in captivity. That's very disconcerting for many Israelis. We heard from top commanders in the IDF saying that this operation was a very unique operation. There was some feeling of euphoria in Israel. I think a lot of people were rightfully celebrating this, but from what I've heard from commanders and from top officials, it was very difficult to handle this sort of operation inside Gaza. So they didn't want Israelis to think that there would be more operations on a daily basis or of this sort. Of course, they are trying, but to gather the amount of intelligence and to operate something like this is extremely difficult, especially in Gaza, and especially in a dense populated areas. So I think what we'll see in the next in the coming weeks is a continuous effort to reach a deal, a hostage deal. This has given Israel a quite big leverage over Hamas that has continuously refused every ceasefire agreement, and did not want to release the hostages originally, or wanted to release first dead hostages, bodies that they hold. So I think now that Israel has actually retrieved 4 living hostages, including Noa Argamani, that has been a symbol for both Hamas and for Israel. I think that has been a very strong blow for Hamas, that will make them more inclined to go to the negotiations, because they know that they are losing their leverage over Israel. We know that Antony Blinken just arrived to Israel this morning. So my hope is that this would lead us to some sort of a hostage release deal, and that we can move to the next stage. That would be the next day after this war. And who is going to run Gaza? It cannot be Hamas, not after what they've done on October 7th. And since then, there must be a new force, then new power that will lead the Gaza Strip, hopefully, to a better future. I mean, luckily, I know that from my time in the IDF as a commander, that served for 5 years, the army is quite separate from the political unrest. They're still going to operate in the professional levels that they are, and they're going to do everything they can to release the hostages and to protect Israeli civilians. That's something that the army will continue doing no matter what political unrest we are seeing. I think that Gantz resignation is going to lead to elections in Israel. Hopefully, Gantz is asking for elections in October. We'll see how realistic that is based on how the war is developing. I think it's a sign that many in Israel, including moderate voices in Israel, are ready for this war to be over. And I'm sure that even the Netanyahu is ready for this war to be over. And I think that there's more inclination from the Israeli side to, although they went to such far length to agree to Hamas conditions as much as they could, but I think that would probably push the Israeli government to find some sort of a deal for a ceasefire and hostage release. We know that Hezbollah, unlike Hamas, is a much bigger and stronger organization that has greater capabilities. I mean, we've seen the northern part of Israel on fire because of Hezbollah's rockets. They are able to reach Tel Aviv quite easily with their rockets, and it will be much more difficult for Israel to fight a war into France, which it already has. I mean, to be frank, since October, Hezbollah has joined the war quite literally. So I think that is a big concern, and we've seen the northern border becoming more of a focus of Israel since Hezbollah's attacks. And Israel has declared last week that they will do everything they can to push Hezbollah off the border. So I think that is a big concern for the Israeli politicians and the political level of how are we going to fight a war into France, and how are we going to make sure that Hezbollah would be deterred from moving forward with this sort of attacks. You know, in the Middle East, it's very important that once you are attacked, that you retaliate, because otherwise you send a message to your other enemies. And of course, Israel is not just fighting Hezbollah and Hamas. We're also fighting against the Houthis and from Yemen. And you know, there are multiple fronts. They're all, of course, coming as proxies from the Islamic Republic in Iran. They are the ones that are funding them and supporting them. That's the evil that is leading those terrorist organizations. But Israel has to be very careful and strategic in making those decisions of where to attack, in what time, and how to protect the borders from the south, from the north, and Israel as a whole.